So there are plenty of ways that questions about your age get raised earlier on in your career, and this happens to both guys and girls, and it's quite often perhaps in a client-facing situation, which you can see from their side. They've been doing that job for several years, and someone who's relatively fresh out of university is asking them questions about how they do their job and trying to find issues. So quite often, early on, you might get asked questions about your age, and so in this video, I'm going to give you some tips about how you can deal with that. I've had quite blatant examples where it may be that clients have only spoken to more experienced colleagues than myself, even though I might have been more senior, or offhand comments such as, "You're such a baby," or "You probably don't remember that," or "I've got suits older than you." They're not trying to be offensive, but it can come off as a little bit grating. So people often think it's complimentary or harmless. However, it can make you feel undermined in a work situation, particularly if these are thrown around a lot. Phrases such as millennials are often misused by other generations and can make you feel that you're being got at. A few years ago, one approach I used, which wasn't very successful, was to dial down my own personality and try and appear more professional and more grown up than perhaps my years. I found that's kind of not the most effective way to deal with it, because over time, the more I've brought myself to work and the more I bring my whole personality, the more successful I've been. So don't do what I did and try and become ultra serious and have no personality, because it's not the most effective way to deal with it. Ultimately, it is unprofessional for someone to ask about your age in a work setting, just as it is about any other characteristic. Imagine if you did it the other way round and you ask an older person in the team when they were planning on retiring, you'd probably find yourself in front of HR or some other kind of punishment for being unprofessional. However, for some reason, there is still this dynamic the other way round. So how can you deal with comments about your age in a productive way? As with any personal question at work, you don't actually have to give an answer, particularly if you don't feel comfortable to do so. So you can use humour to deflect it by saying something like, "I'm old enough to know better and I'm not going to answer that," or "I stopped counting at 21. You can also turn it back round to them and say, "How old do you think I am?" This might cause them to think twice about saying a really young age, but also gives you a gauge of perhaps where they're going with it. If you want to be more assertive, you can ask them a question of, "Why do you ask?" Again, it might help them think about actually what the origins of that question are and make them realise that their own behaviour is unacceptable. But in most circumstances, you don't need to feel like you have to play it down. You can just say your age in a really confident way, and that will curtail any kind of further conversation on it. Another tip you can use is to, instead of referring to your direct age, is you can do something to establish your competence or your qualification in that area. You can say something like, "I've been auditing for 4 years," or "It's 3 years since I graduated with my master's." By acting like it's a non-issue and referring back to your work experience, it just takes the sting out of the situation and avoids you having to directly say how old you are. If there's a question you regularly get asked, it may be worth looking at your own language and presentation to see if there's something you're doing which is creating those issues. I often end sentences with a upwards intonation, which sounds like you're asking a question. Actually, in fact, it's because I watched way too many Australian soaps when I was a child, but it can make you seem unsure of what you're saying. So perhaps if this is happening to you a lot, just think about the pace and tone of your speech and make sure that you're coming across in a confident and professional manner. Also, something I see a lot in women is by starting sentences by "sorry" or "apologising," which again sort of undermines your confidence and makes you come across as less experienced than perhaps you are. The other thing I really notice with more junior colleagues is often they don't say their full name or aren't really confident about introducing themselves. So practice this a few times before you're in a client situation or a team situation, just so that you can really comfortably and confidently state who you are and what your role is in the team when someone asks you. Beyond what you say, also think about things like body language, your stance, your way of sitting. I've got one manager I work with who really hates a limp handshake. So again, that might be something that shows that you're younger or you perhaps lack confidence. So particularly as we're going out into meeting people again, and it's going to feel weird anyway, having physical contact with people who aren't your family, but make sure you practice handshakes and are really confident when you go into those situations. Also, depending on your work environment, the way that you dress might be a factor. Now, I think the ways that professionals dress is going to change over time. We've all sat in our jogging pants for like the last 18 months or so, so I think the suit and tie might be dead forever. However, making sure that your wardrobe is work appropriate and suits the clients that you're working with will help you convey a more confident image, but also not betray your age. In a physical setting, this might seem really obvious, but sit near the top of the table. More often than not, I see junior and younger staff opting to sit at the bottom end of a table, away from the key players and the decision makers, and that naturally creates a power imbalance in the room and reinforces any hierarchy based on age. So if you get the opportunity to pick a seat near the top of the table. As with all challenges, look around your network and see if there's someone who does this really well. Maybe there's someone who's a peer of yours, or perhaps just a couple of years ahead of you, who comes across well and doesn't get these challenges. Look at what they do, model their behaviour, and perhaps ask them for any tips. If there's someone you trust at work who's slightly more senior than you, perhaps ask them if they think it's an issue or if there's anything obvious that you're doing that you could perhaps correct in the future. Having said all of that, youth is an advantage, particularly as we move to more agile and innovative ways of working and we have new technologies. So use your age as an asset and in fact your unfair advantage, and don't be ashamed of how old you are compared to others. Bring ideas to the table and input into decision-making processes that will make you seem more of an equal and a peer rather than a more junior colleague. This helps establish you as competent and confident and will help those questions about your age fade into the background over time. Leave a comment below if you've ever had a question about your age or experience at work and perhaps how you dealt with it. I'm Liz and I'm a partner in a large accounting firm, and I've got a real passion for management and leadership topics. So here on my channel, we talk about the tips, tricks and hacks to help you navigate your career.